Hey, it's Mazzy here, and this is a video that's a little different for me in the vinyl community here, so it might go beyond that. Although it will be centered, I promise, around records. Today is September 18th, 1970. I woke up and I turned on NPR radio, because that's what us liberals do. We listen to the morning NPR occasionally, and I heard a 5-minute segment that today is the anniversary. 50 years ago on the 18th in the United Kingdom, the first Black Sabbath album, Paranoid, was released. Now, it didn't come out in the United States until the following year, till 1971. So I'm not going to show that record. And as a matter of fact, I really didn't get into or buy any records by Black Sabbath until 1973 when I worked at a record store and some guy kept playing it. So I got the first 2 records. Now, I'm not a huge Black Sabbath fan by any stretch of the imagination, and I totally get when I'm into it. I love it. I did first get turned on to them by a track that was on one of those Warner Reprise samplers that you get for $2 for 2 records. So there was it Paranoid? I forgot which song, the hit song. Da 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 da. Whatever. You guys are better, know about this shit better than I do. But it gave me these sense memories, these flashbacks of 1970, of September 1970. In fact, it gave me flashbacks of that summer and that fall, which was extremely special in my life, and to this day, extremely vivid, and I can remember specific moments, a lot of moments. I was buying a lot of records then. All my money, I was working part-time, going to high school. Now, I turned 16 on August 23rd, 1970, so I got my driver's license. That, especially people of my generation, that was the biggest deal. That summer of 1970, I went with my confirmation class. Yes, Jews are confirmed, or some of them are, when they're about 15, 16, between sophomore and junior year. We went to Israel. We lived on a kibbutz called Tel Yitzhak, which is near Netanya on the coast, and not too far from Tel Aviv. And for 2 months, that was our base camp. We'd go to all around to Jerusalem, New City, Old City of Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, the Golan Heights. Now remember, this is just 3 days after the 6-Day War, so there was some certain things that we'd have to have on the bus, 1 gun for every 10 people. So there's a shot of me somewhere holding this rifle, which I'm such a pacifist, and I've never shot a gun in my life. But I won't digress. I won't into that area. But the thing about that year and that trip is it's the first time that I really fell in love. And at the time, our confirmation class, our synagogue, which was a Reform synagogue, which means the liberal synagogue, we're very Jewish, obviously, but we don't go through all the customs. You know, we'll drive on Saturdays on the Sabbath, and so on. And there's basically Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. Orthodox are the very religious, and the Hasidic Jews, which are Orthodox Jews and beyond. And I won't get into all that, but I consider myself a very cultural Jew, not a religious Jew anymore. Although going to Israel, going to the Dead Sea, going to the Wailing Wall, going to Bethlehem was just an amazing thing, 15, 16 years old. But on the trip, our 2 synagogues merged that year. A conservative synagogue and a Reform synagogue merged, became one. And it was a little bit of a shit show because the conservative synagogue wanted a totally kosher kitchen and all these rules, and we were the liberals. So there was some tempestuous times there. But so the confirmation class was a combination of these 2 synagogues, and we went on the trip together. There was probably about 30 of us, and we hooked up with a group from New York that was with the kibbutz with us. So we became fast friends and little cliques, just like high school, nothing different. But there was a woman a young woman who was came onto the trip with us. Her name was Judy, and she was from the other synagogue with us in San Francisco. And when I laid eyes on her, she had beautiful dark brown eyes, brown hair. I was my heart, you know, when you're a 15, 16-year-old boy, and you really like a girl and you blah, 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 blah. I didn't know what to say. I think I had one real date, sort of, for my confirmation ball a few months before that. But that's another story I don't want to get into in this video, because it's remarkable in its own in its own sense. Anyway, on this 2-month trip, after about a month and a half, halfway through, Judy and I hooked up. Now, we weren't hooking up like kids hook up today, you know, but we were making out. We were young and infatuated with each other. This was me in Israel in 1970. Hubba. I could have been a Backstreet Boy. Look at that. Just that kind of haircut. My hair was getting long. Like the next year 2 years would be down to my shoulders. Yes, bald guys had hair at one point. And this was Judy, a picture I took of Judy. What a beautiful young woman. And now, Judy was 1 year older than me, but I was 15, she was 17, because her birthday was in April, mine was in August. So that's a huge difference when you're that age. But we ended up going out for 3 years. That's a part of the story that's important, because it's a mindset of where I was. That I was happy. I came back, I got my driver's license. Judy and I continued our romance for 3 years, and it was wonderful. And I would buy a lot of records, and I'm showing records from September, October, November, December 1970. 4 months of 1970 in 1 year. What a remarkable time. Now, those of you who watch my channel, I'm not just a person that, back in my day, well, I do that, but I'm not only showing old records. I show new music too, and I keep up with a lot of music. But I pulled out a shitload of records, and all these records, just to let you know, I bought all these records at the time they were released in those 4 months, in the fall, autumn, winter of 1970. Now, I would say 3/4 of these records are actually my original 50-year-old copies. A few of them I purged over the years and rebought, but I'm going to kind of go through them somewhat quickly and give you a little sense of what the music was like. And again, those of you who collect records, you're going to know all these records. So it's not like some big secret undiscovered record. It's going to be some of the same old shit. But these meant so much to me. I got my driver's license as soon as I got back the next week. And my mother would work at this department store near the high school that my girlfriend went to. She went to a different high school than I did in San Francisco. And my mother worked at a department store, and every day after school, the days I wasn't working, I'd go there at 2:30, pick up her car, drive it around. It was a 1968 blue with a black vinyl top Buick Skylark. And that was the car I drove. And then I'd come at 5:30 or 5:45, 6 o'clock, whenever it was, and pick my mother up and drive her home, and we'd have dinner. But I'd have the car. I didn't have my own car right away until the next year. But that was a time where we all drove at 16 right away. We all drove in San Francisco and the Bay Area and everything. But this record, the Rolling Stones, Get Your Ya-Ya's Out. Now this is important in so many ways. It's one of the great live rock albums of all time. And also, even though this came out in September and was from the tour at Madison Square Garden, that I did see the tour, I believe it was October when they played the Oakland Coliseum. But I also, in December, snuck out with some friends who weren't really my friends, I hate to say the troublemakers in school, but sort of the hippies. And I kind of would merge between the hippies and the hippie jocks. I was a hippie jock because I ran track, cross country, and played soccer. I wasn't a jock like the football, basketball, baseball jocks. So they didn't like us hippie jocks. We were in the middle, merging around. But I did go to Altamont with some of those hippies, and that was a whole other experience. So Rolling Stones, Got Your Ya-Ya's Out. Another album that came out in September, I was buying the Birds albums since I was a kid, since Turn, Mr. Tamarine Man. This album came out. It was a whole different thing. I remember, I've said this on my channel many times, Chestnut Mare was the song that sealed it for me. Sweetheart of the Rodeo 2 years earlier, I got into a little bit, but I wasn't quite sold on the whole country fusion thing yet. I was starting, 1970 is when the country fusion thing, I really understood it. And there's several albums here that will give you that kind of vibe. And I realize this is the Clarence White years, and Roger McGuinn, and Skip Batton, and Gene Parsons, not Graham Parsons, not to be confused with, but one of my favorite albums, one jam side, one album, and a studio album, and some country bits in there. Of course, I got into Fleetwood Mac. I got Albatross, that single I purchased, but I didn't really have their albums, maybe until Kiln House. And this is the years with Danny Kerwin, and Jeremy Spencer was in the band then. What's interesting about this record too is I love Station Man. Station Man got a lot of FM play in San Francisco, as did Tell Me All the Things That You Do. Both songs co-written by Danny Kerwin. But there's a song on here that became sort of a pitter-patter song for me. It's called Jewel-Eyed Judy. When you're 16 years old and you have a girlfriend and there's a song about her and you play this record for her, Jewel-Eyed Judy, and it's a really sweet, beautiful song. So Kiln House, September of that year. My favorite Neil Young album of all time is After the Gold Rush. I got Nowhere. This is the one right before it. I didn't get his first album right away, but I just love this record. And I realized, thinking about Black Sabbath and that rock and roll, I loved rock and roll like that. I was starting to go to Winterland a lot in San Francisco, seeing all these great shows. And there was a mix of kinds of music and genres playing. I think the heaviest record I had at the time, or up to this point, was Vincimus Eruptum by Blue Cheers, Summertime Blues, another San Francisco band, on Phillips Records. Is it Phillips, I think? And I loved it, just loved it. Our band used to cover that. But this record, I realized instead of the Black Sabbaths of the world and that kind of genre that was starting to happen, heavier bands, I was into the singer-songwriters, a lot of acoustic stuff, a lot of great songwriting and production. So Neil Young was right up in that alley. And a lot of these you'll see were like that. So this record. And of course, all around San Francisco, you could hear this record and really just, put them, just exploded Santana. Obviously, what really turned the world on to Santana was Michael Shreve's drumming in Woodstock and that version of Soul Sacrifice. But when this came out in September, it just changed everything too. Oye Como Va was everywhere. This whole record was on our turntables all the time. Local San Francisco band, so we really, really love this band. And I did see them at Winterland around probably in 71, I'd say. I can't remember exactly, but important record. Now, Tower Records was around, so we'd go to Tower Records, but once we were driving, we'd go through all the little independent stores. There was a Music Odyssey. There was a little store called Doty's, Doughty's, on Geary Boulevard near Park Presidio in the Richmond district of San Francisco. And I'm getting very technical because these are my memories. And I remember going there all the time because they would sell new records for $2.74, which, when something was on sale, it might have been $2.99, but most records were $3.99, $3.50 maybe. So $2.74, that extra 20 cents or dollar. And these elderly, they were probably in their 40s or 30s even, women ran the store. And it was really old school, but they had the coolest records with little signs. And that's where I got Kiln House, actually. So I'd see things and I'd go there all the time. Well, up on the shelf, I saw this. I had no idea what the fuck this record was. Excuse my French, but it just looked really intriguing. It was September. I hadn't read anything about it. I didn't know anything about it. If you look on the back, this is all you see. I can't remember if there was a hype sticker. I assume there probably was, but I don't remember that. The only person, there's two people I knew. I knew Ian Gillan, who had just been a member of Deep Purple, his lead singing, because I did get into Deep Purple. And I knew Mike Diabo from Manfred Mann. maybe Murray Head. Maybe I didn't know Murray Head's name. But I just, sight unseen, sight unheard, I should say, I bought this record. I brought it home. I played this record every day for a couple weeks, seriously. And I learned the story of the last few days of Jesus Christ. Now, I pull this record out every Christmas, and everyone corrects me saying it's an Easter record. I don't give a shit about the religious aspects of this. I just love this record. I think this is one of the few true rock operas because there's really a rock band as the core center of this record. Yes, there's orchestration and stuff, but if you really listen to it, this version over any other version, over the soundtrack of the movie, which by Norman Jewison, which I'm not a fan of, this record just bowled me over. And I learned more about the story. And of course, Yvonne Elliman went on to tour and play and sing on Eric Clapton's records. Of course, that year also, one of my favorite Pink Floyd records. Now, this isn't the record I got. I think the record I got did not have the name here. This, for some reason, I got rid of some of my Pink Floyd records during my 90s purge and rebought them later. But just love this record. It was so different, but I had loved Pink Floyd and just was a big fan of Pink Floyd. So Adam Hart, Mother. And that was, I believe, October that started. Also in October, I'd been buying Dylan albums since my first single was Like a Rolling Stone. My first album was Highway 61, and then my favorite album is Blonde on Blonde. But I love this record. And of course, there's a song on here that I would love even more because If Not For You really was a song that George Harrison covered really well. So love New Morning by Bob Dylan. Really different album, a little bit country, but really rootsy, but beautiful record. I was an Elton John fan since his first album, Your Song. This Elton John and Bernie Taupin had a really kind of Americana country flavor to it. It's just a gorgeous record. Tumbleweed Connection. For the first 6 years, up until maybe Brown Dirt Cowboy, He Could Do No Wrong. After that, But that run, probably one of the strongest runs of hits and albums and a lot of great deep cuts of any artist of the 70s, obviously. Also, I had been a Dead fan. I had seen the Dead starting in 1968 in Golden Gate Park, the Grateful Dead. If you can hear music lightly in the background, Dark Star. There's nothing like a Grateful Dead concert. I'd seen them in the park, then I started seeing them at Winterland. And that year, this came out, and I would buy anything that's Grateful Dead. Vintage Dead, it was some early tapes on a different label. I don't know, it was just, they didn't have access to the tapes, the Dead, and it was put out as a, I don't want to say gray market because it was put out and official, but it was recorded live from the Avalon Ballroom in '66. Love this record, but fun record. I don't remember all the, well, Kelly Mouse did the cover from that, and anyway, Grateful Dead. But what came out, I mean, you all know Working Man's Dead and American Beauty. These two records, this and earlier in the year, this was October, I believe, these two records came out. And to me, they're the best two Grateful Dead studio records, and they're two essential records in any collection of anyone who likes roots music, country music. And again, it started getting into that country thing, and I was kind of really getting onto it. Remember, the singer-songwriter thing was starting too. So this is a perfect record. And again, just think about it. All these records are 50 years old, essentially now, this fall and this winter. I would play all these records for my girlfriend, and she liked music too. I remember I had an 8-track player that I put in the Buick, the kind where you take out the anti-theft thing. Think about those 8 tracks. You put a song on it. If it was a long song, especially like Grateful Dead or something, it would stop, click into the next track, so there'd be that lag. What a bizarre thing when you think about it. But I remember so specifically with my buddies, we'd go in that car, and every weekend, it seems like, we were living at home, obviously, because we were kids. We were 16 years old. But 16 and 17, almost, maybe not every weekend, a couple times a month, we'd get in our cars 2 cars, usually in caravan, and go camping. And we go up to these Point Reyes National Forest and in the Marin headlands, excuse me, and go up to Mill Valley, beyond Mill Valley, Point Reyes National Forest, up on the way on the Highway 1 coast through Olema, through Marshall, and we'd go Stanislaus County, we'd go up into San Mateo County, above Redwood Hills where Neil Young's ranch was, over from between Montera, Half Moon Bay, and the ranch where Neil Young had his ranch. And we'd go camping, and we'd have our tape player. I don't remember what kind of tape player, I guess cassettes. I can't remember now. And we'd be in the tent, and that's where I first started smoking pot. And of course you remember this record, Led Zeppelin 3. I love Led Zeppelin. To me, my favorite one is their first album still, but I'm not a oh my God, Led Zeppelin guy. But I think this record's brilliant, obviously, for a lot of reasons. And of course the cover, this is a reissue, this isn't the original. Again, I purged my friggin' reissue Led Zeppelin records. I had been a big, again, singer-songwriters. Van Morrison was living in the Bay Area, so I'd see him around. I saw him either 70, 71 at a live radio broadcast that K-San did in San Francisco, and it was broadcast. And there was maybe 25 people in the studio. Seeing Van Morrison in I can't remember if it was 70 or 71, was just one of the most amazing things I'd ever seen. Just amazing. Domino, he had a series of great hits. Blue Money, Virgo Clowns, Street Choir. God, perfect record. This period of Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers could do no wrong from my point of view. Again, I remember I took a workshop with my buddy Larry. Larry is the drummer I was in a band with at the time. This is his drum set. If you've watched my videos before, I have his drum set since he passed several years ago. But we took a workshop down in Redwood City, California, just not even a half hour south of San Francisco, at Ampex, A-M-P-E-X. If you know Ampex Recording, they were sort of a early figure in the recording process of half-inch and 1-inch tapes for broadcast and for recording. And I took some recording classes and some video workshops in the summer. And Larry and I, or in the fall, is on Saturdays. So Larry and I would take every Saturday for 6 weeks, we'd take this class, and we were down in Redwood City, and we went to El Camino Real, to some record store. I don't remember the name of the record store. And I saw this record on the wall. And I had heard the song Lucky Man. And that just blew me away. I don't think we even called this stuff prog. It wasn't called prog. It was just a little different. It was the heavy organs. Of course, the previous years we'd hear organs in Vanilla Fudge and bands like that, where they'd add these B3 and larger, literally Hammond and church organs, where they'd friggin' drag them in and hook them up. And hearing this record and Greg Lake's vocalizing of Lucky Man, I mean, the rest of the stuff was out there and syncopated rhythms, and you all know this record, but that single, of course, it's probably the most commercial thing they've ever done. Lucky Man, it's just an amazing thing, and that synthesizer that pops out at the end and fades out was awesome. But I remember that day with Larry seeing this on the wall 50 friggin' years ago, Emerson, Lake and Palmer's debut album. I'd been a fan of Crosby, Stills and Nash, and then all the solo records started coming out, and this one I think is stunning. And of course the big hit on this was Love the One You're With. Great song. The opening of that song, whatever you want to say about Steve Stills, and if you're not a fan of the singer-songwriter and la-di-da and the kumbaya shit, listen to the opening of that song. What a great friggin' recorded single and album. Jimi Hendrix is on one cut, and I believe this came out after Jimmy died. It was recorded, because it was dedicated to James Marshall Hendrix. That's right. This is not my original copy, obviously, because mine would not have had the gold sticker, because I would have got it right away. But I don't think I probably traded it in during my record store days to get a better quality version, which I probably thought I wore the other one out or something. But great, sit yourself down, I'd loved him since Buffalo Springfield. And I started getting all those first albums by the three of them. The first David Crosby album and the first Graham Nash solo album are all perfect albums of the day, of the 70s. And one album that was everywhere, of course, and now it's celebrating its 50. Cat Stevens, Tea for the Tillerman, he did the illustrations. I went to see him in 71 at the Berkeley Community Theater with Judy, and it was an awesome concert. He was great. He sounded amazing. He still sounds amazing. He goes by the name Yusef now, and he actually re-recorded this entire album. I'm a little hesitant to check it out, but I'm interested because his voice is still good in his last few solo albums. One side of me says, why bother? But I'd like to hear his take of this music 50 years later. You know, reimagination, reworking, or just, why not? They're his songs. I don't know if I need it, but I'd like to check it out. This is a perfect album, and this was everywhere 50 years ago. Now, of course, probably one of the biggest surprises of 1970 was All Things Must Pass. George Harrison came out of the gate with 2 records plus a jam record of all, pent up demand, pent up songwritings, a song or two that was left over that the Beatles wouldn't, All Things Was Past, the Beatles tried like a million friggin' times and they would never let George put it on their album. And George came out here. Now, I played this record twice in the last month again after not playing it for a few years. And there's a whole revisionist body of people out there who feel we want to strip all that Phil Spector, too much echo. I think this is a great friggin' record. Now the remix version that George did, what was it, 15 years ago, 20 years ago? 20 years ago, I guess, is terrible in my opinion. This still sounds great. It's just, that kind of soft song that he starts out with. It's a cover song, I'll Have You Anytime. I think it's the Dylan song. But then it blasts into My Sweet Lord. And of course, Wah Wah and version 1 of Isn't a Pity. Of course, What Is Life? Behind That Locked Door, another country gem, Apple Scruffs. Ballad of Sir Frankie Crisp. Awaiting You All is probably a perfect song. The Pope owns 51% of General Motors. The stock exchange is the only thing he's qualified to quote us. Perfect record, possibly the best Beatles solo album. 1970, 50 years ago. And of course, I think they're going to announce any minute now, there is going to be finally a reissue of this coming fall. CD with extended tracks, just a vinyl reissue finally, because this is the one Kinks album that's the hardest to get. The song Lola just really was a hit single. BBC had him change the lyrics from Coca-Cola to Cherry Cola, I believe. There's a transgender concept in the song too, but what a perfect record, 50 years old. I mean, look at all these records in 4 months. All these records came out in 4 months. I'm 16 years old. I'm driving around. I have a girlfriend. I'm in love. I'm ready to get out of high school. I finished high school, ended up finishing in February, so I only had to go to high school halfway in my senior year because I took all these extra classes and did this work program. I was working, during this time I was working. You're saying, how would you get all this money? Well, I did the 4-4 program, which basically 2 days a week at 11:30 or whatever, I'd get out of school, I'd take the bus and the streetcars downtown to Market Street, San Francisco, in an old deco building, the Shell Oil building. And I worked at a law firm called Hall, Henry, Oliver, McCreevy that specialized in maritime law. Boy, was my grandmother and my mother so excited thinking I was going to become a lawyer. What I did is I filed law books. I went down to City Hall to file summonses. I worked, filled in on the switchboard when the receptionist was taking a lunch break and have her breaks in the afternoon. Now, this is one of the switchboards you've seen in movies where you pull out the cords and put it in and do. What a shit show that is to learn. But when you're 16, you'll learn anything fast. It's like everyone on computer games now, right? this kind of shit. I was putting that thing out, and of course my hair was getting longer. I was wearing these red shoes, like I think in the second year. I had like the hippie tie on, the flower tie, with these conservative law firms. All the women who were the paralegals and the secretaries befriended me, because I was what, 16. They were probably like literally early 20s. I'd go to Grateful Dead and the concerts with them. I'd go record shopping. We were just all friends sometimes. But I would turn them on to music too. And it was just a vivid memory. And when I was downtown on Market Street, there was a couple record stores, but one was called Discount Records, which was a chain. They were in Berkeley, San Francisco. There's also Sherman and Clay, which was a music store that sold pianos. It had a small record section. But I'd go down to Discount Records on my breaks every time or when I had to walk down to City Hall. If the streetcar wasn't there, I'd walk a bunch of blocks and go into Discount Records. And I remember buying this record. Obviously, we all knew Sly Stone, mainly from Woodstock. Even though he's a local producer, he produced the first Beau Brummels records out of San Francisco. He's a DJ. But again, another San Francisco artist who exploded because of Woodstock. I bought this record. I remember at the time seeing one of those sandwich board signs in front of Discount Records, and it said non-such sale, $1.99. And I had no idea what that meant. Non-such sale, does that mean there's no such sale for $1.99? If you know what I'm talking about, there's a label called Non-Such Records. Well, it was Non-Such. I had no idea what Non-Such Records was. But I'd go in, I'd talk to the guy named Hale Milgram who worked there, who would later go on to work for Warner Brothers Records, became president of Elektra Records, head of marketing, and then I'm sorry, not president, but head of marketing for Elektra Records. Then in the 90s, early 90s, he was a president of Capitol Records. But I remember him, and he would turn me on to so much music. Non-Such had their Explorer series, which was budget classical and almost like field recordings from different countries. And I bought this and so many other records. Again, these are these really specific, vivid memories. And of course, one of the friggin' songs that blew the radio apart, the riff by Duane Allman for Eric Clapton's album and Derek and the Dominoes' Layla. Song written about Patty, Boyd, Harrison, Clapton. Layla, what a great record. I mean, a perfect record. Of course, being the Beatle freak I am, and also being a fan of, earlier that year, I believe, of Magic Christian music, or was that 69 maybe, I'm blanking out. But this fall also in 1970 was No Dice. And No Dice by Badfinger, and the song No Matter What. That opening guitar riff is just brilliant. This record's produced by Jeff Emmerich, who was an engineer on most of the Beatles, or all the Beatle records, starting from from Revolver on. One song was produced by Mal Evans, who was the Beatles assistant roadie who worked with them all throughout their career. But this is a wonderful pop, power pop masterpiece, Badfinger. Tragedy to Badfinger. But of course, 16-year-old boys, hey, I had a girlfriend. I wasn't worried about this. Young boy memories. Now, the whole Soul thing happened in December. What the fuck? Where did this come from, man? I friggin' loved it. But it's hard to imagine 50 years later what this sounded like in 1970. Stripped down, raw, angry, angsty. You know, a man full of pain, John Lennon's angst, singing Mother and Remember, you know. Mother, you had me, I've never had you. My mummy's dead. God is a concept by which we measure our pain. I don't believe in Beatles. I believe in me, just Yoko and me. Of course, I got the Yoko version too, and like, what the fuck was that about? I've grown to love that. It was dramatic, it was intense, it was wonderful. But John Lennon, I mean, going through the Arthur Janoff therapy, primal screaming, heroin, John Lennon, 50 fucking years ago, man. It was just so wonderful being there. Now I always, show Jefferson Airplane because I love Jefferson Airplane. They were my favorite San Francisco band. This came out. Now there was some solo work starting to come out. This is Paul Kantner's Jefferson Starship. Paul Kantner, Jefferson Starship. It's not the Jefferson Starship you all know. It's really a solo album with a lot of people. Blows Against the Empires. It won like a Nobelo Award or a Hugo Award. It was the first album to ever win a certain literary science fiction award. Paul Kantner's a big, science fiction space nerd and writes a lot of songs about that. I love this record. Nicky Hopkins is on it. Grace Slick's on it. David Freeberg is on it from the who would be in the Starship later, who was in Quicksilver. David Crosby is on it. There was such a clique of great stuff in San Francisco. People working at Wally Heider's studio, people working at the Automat later. Jerry Garcia's on it. Phil Lesh is on it, I believe. It just is a amazing record. If you give this record time and you plug into it, it's such a gorgeous, worthwhile record. The CD has some expanded stuff with some alternate version, which is quite good. So I'm just saying, Blows Against the Empire, and of course, Paul Kantner, Jefferson Starship. 50 fucking years ago. Just a few more, but this is autobiographical. This is more autobiographical than I anticipated. Although I knew it had to be. I knew for me, I had to do this. It's almost like this is my therapy session. Mark, are you out there? Mark is not my therapist. It's a private joke. Okay. I've told stories on my channel about Trout Mask, getting it, returning it, not getting it 2 years later. But for some reason, I bought this record. This is a reissue because I got rid of this record again too. Captain Beefheart, you buy them, they cometh and he taketh away, and all that's great stuff. I don't know what to say about this, although it's an adventure, and I really like it now. But I did buy it then, and I tried to play it for Judy once. She wasn't having it. So I knew I would trade this album away to be with this woman. Wouldn't you? Now, I was buying every Steve Miller album since Children of the Future and Sailor and on. To me, the first 5 or 6 are better. I like the first early Steve Miller album, band records, better than when he became famous and popular and he had hooks everywhere, left and right. Jetliner, Fly Like an Eagle. I get that stuff. I'm glad he finally made money because he didn't make any fucking money with these albums. But I would buy every single Steve Miller album as they came out. This is 50 years old, just about, in the next couple months. Number 5. There's a great song, was it Eatin' Hot Chili? It's kind of a funny song that Tim sings, Tim Davis sings. This was a great band. This is when they were a trio. Again, I think this is produced by a Steve Miller Band. All the first 4 albums were produced by Glenn Johns, some in London and everything. But all these records have great deep cuts. This opens up with a song called Good Morning, and I Love You, which is just wonderful. I really suggest that everyone check out all these Steve Miller albums. For me, for my money, they're more enjoyable than the later stuff. I know, the boomers, post-boomers, younger, Steve Miller Band, all that, but I loved it. I do like a Stratocaster sound he used to get. I saw him around this time when he would do, he was I saw him at Winterland, he did an amazing set. He'd always do an acoustic sit-down solo set as well. And he was just tight. Great musician, a little bit of an egocentric motherfucker, but he made great records, Even these records are fucking fantastic. Now, a song that was on the radio that was so different at the time, and I ate it up and I bought the record, was this. Eric Burton Declares War. And the hit on this is Spill the Wine. You all know it, you all heard it. I love that even was he on 2 albums? They backed him up and they worked with him. And then after that, they went on their own. Obviously, they became bigger than their collaborative work with Eric Burton. But Eric Burton kind of got him out there, got him signed to eventually United Artists. This was not, is this United Artists? It was MGM. But this is a wonderful record still. Eric Burton Declares War. Didn't even know there was a band called War. And I don't know the history, some of you may know. Were they called War, or did they just take the name after working with Eric on this record? But love this record, important record. And again, another record that became a little more soulful, you know, at the time. This record, I've talked about Cooter so much. I'm not sure why I bought this record, but it might have been at that place Doty's, because I would just buy things that looked interesting. That's when you bought things because of a cover. Warner Brothers was one of those labels. I always looked to see who's on it. Cooter. Okay, Van Dyke Parks is on it. I knew him from working with the Beach Boys. I didn't know at the time who Chris Etheridge was, I don't think. Or Roy Estrada I knew because of the Mothers of Invention and Little Feat. And produced by Van Dyke Parks. I don't know why I bought this. It had a song called Pig Meat. It has Old Kentucky Home, and I'd heard Randy Newman's version of that song because he wrote it. And I bought this record, and it was a love affair with Cooter as a guitar player, as an innovator. Now, not a great, fantastic debut, but really interesting and ballsy for Columbia to sign someone like Cooter and stick with them for all those records. I love that about Cooter. I love getting turned on to this music and being 16 years old and having all this record. Think about this. This is 4 months. The last record I'm going to show right here is The Move. Okay, this is obviously The Move before they merged into ELO, but this is a record when Jeff Lynne was in the band with Roy Wood and Bev Bevan. Rick Price was in it, and their lead singer of The Move had left. Carl Wayne. Brontosaurus is on here. Again, a little harder, a little different than I was used to, but I love British music, and I was getting a lot of imports starting around this time. I didn't get this as an import, but this is a Capitol record. Again, 50 years old this fall. Now, what am I trying to say here? I'm fucking old. But, you know, Judy and I would go on to be together till 1973, and then we broke up. Why do people break up? Why do fools fall in love? Why do they fall out of love? I fell in love with someone else. I fell in love with Catherine. And it wasn't just leaving one for the other. I'm not that kind of cad at all. Something just, you know, growing up. I was in college, San Francisco State College, majored in radio, television, communication, broadcasting, minored in film, took a lot of film classes. Didn't really minor, they didn't have official minors, but I took a lot of cinema classes, and I worked in that law firm. And then in 1973, I got a job at a record store, Warehouse Records, which was a California chain. On Ocean Avenue, they're opening a new store in San Francisco, and I got a job at the Warehouse Records. And I quit my job at the law firm, and my mother and my grandmother were so upset. 50 years ago, 1970 to 2020, look at this great music that came out in just 4 fucking months. Mazzy loves you. It's a autobiographical postscript. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, since it is September 18th, 2020, today's the 50th anniversary of the death of Jimi Hendrix. We lost Jimi Hendrix 50 years ago. Jimmy, we miss you, we love you. I remember driving to school. I borrowed the car that day, and I was driving to school with one of my buddies, and the marquee on a movie theater nearby, they'd taken down, maybe it was on the way home, they'd taken down the regular marquee, and on one side of the marquee said Jimi Hendrix, R.I.P. And I wish I had a picture of that, but I remember that day. So Jimi Hendrix, we love you. You brought us so much. So 50 years ago, man, what a time to live. Great time for music, and thank you again. Mazzy loves you.